One of the stories, philosophers talk to our times, one of the stories philosophers always tell itself is that Kant invented time. That before Kant, philosophy was somehow always locked in something akin to the present. And that after Kant, the inner sense, the idea that to create any now, your brain has done an awful lot of work, sorting out the impressions that pile into it, making them run into the future, fixing them in the past, cutting it to create presence. The conception then of the present is made difficult. It becomes at the level of the conceptual, at the level at which you can go, yep, that's that, and a sequence of, yep, that's. And that's all very well and dandy. And it kind of works. But I often think with Kant's theory of time, it works very, very well in the present. It explains that very well. But it hits heavy water the minute you're really trying to do what we properly mean by the time. And that's the past, and how you respond to the long past. And that's why philosophers like Hegel or Bergson were very much, or much later Deleuze, were very much working to try to take that Kantian intuition, that time and its unity matter in some way, beyond the present, and to draw it into a rubric, a way of thinking that allowed you to understand that in terms of the greater picture of time, the time in which one has one's life. That's also being in time with Heidegger. And yet, you will, if you follow these blogs and at all, will know that I am ambivalent about all of this. I'm ambivalent. I love Kant's move, and I also love the later philosophy that comes out of it. And yet, it isn't true that earlier thinkers were locked in the present. They just did time differently. And that matters, because what someone like Spinoza did, or Leibniz, is they had a shattered version of time. They didn't have one thing. There was no sequence of nows. Presents, then, were detached from the rest of time. Spinoza, for instance, suggests that you imagine time by imagining the movement of the sun, with fixed presents at various times in that movement of the sun. Now, that is his academic account of time. And already you can see the present is necessary for understanding time. Now, you could just see this as a fault in the theory, or you could understand it as what he is trying to do is to understand our understanding of time. And yet, he's got another theory of transition. And of course he does. He gives you two. He says that presents come and go, because at any one time, there will be a stable set of perceptions that are feeding into those individuals that make your soul. If you like, the wave tank that is you, that will allow you to form a whole set of images. And as those images break and change, the world breaks and changes, and you change. So that you're in the middle of one world, and then you're in the middle of another, and then you're in the middle of a third. Time then happens, both on the local, the Kantian, which for Spinoza would be on the level of individuals, but also on the greater level, which is the level on which you can conceive it as a moving force, a one thing that runs across many. Because that is, of course, what Kant gives time. I should have said that earlier. What Kant gives time is a unity that can't be understood in terms of spatial relations. A oneness, the I think, or the it that thinks, or the its that think, but communicate that thought. And yet, of course, Spinoza has yet another theory of time, in which emotions are defined ultimately by time. Pain and joy are emotions of time, and also desire. Desire is an emotion that is always getting you forward, moving you on. Time then becomes, within Spinoza, far more of a choasmos. There's lots of different sorts of time. And how you relate to it, and who you will depend on who and what you are. It's not a thing in itself, so much as a cacophony of very separate things, all communicating, all relating one to the other, all, I would probably argue, casting a shadow upon each other, but distinct in themselves. So why does this matter to you? It matters to me. One of the things, go back in the being back in the jug again, teaches me By being back in the jug, I mean living in the van again, is the importance of the past. Now, here I'll need to give you a little bit of my own biography. I'm weirdly epileptic. I'm very stable, but one of the things epilepsy does is to scramble my long-term past with my short-term past, so that I often have problems telling them apart. But it all happens in the past, so it doesn't really impede the present very much. You can kind of see why I ended up a philosopher, can't you? And that means this issue of where the past is matters to me. Because the past, I don't live in a Bergsonian past where it's all nicely, discreetly, well, in a sequence of brackets or ever-expanding parts of a cone arranged so you can go, well, that's there, that's there, that's there, that echoes down there. Because I directly feel the echo. That's why I love Spinoza's image of the time, that it is genuinely a chaos. That if you remember things in the past, you remember them as they, you remember also the movement, and it's like a kaleidoscope, like a palimpsest of different times crashing into the other. But what you can do at times when you need it is to call upon the old past. And so, if you've gone from a house that you spent the last 3 years building, wham, bam, your partner breaks up their shoulders and you're back in the van again, where do you go to understand it but the past? Your medium past and the medium, and then you re-understand that past. Of course, you understand it differently because you've got more to understand it with. You can understand it more like a common notion, more like how it might have been, more like how it connects to the world. Going back into the past then, pulling up the past as it is, but also from where you are now, becomes a positive experience, a creative experience. And why does this matter to you? It might matter to me, but it all feels terribly abstract, doesn't it? Well, if I think about how I relate to my poor little fascist friends, you know the ones that get invaded by that thing that invades them. One of the ways I still can get to them is that past. You can still remind them of who they were. And from that perspective, who they are now shifts a little. I think we live, you see, in the world of Spinozain pasts now. The present is being made darker and yet darker. And as it becomes darker, the sky turns darker yet. And the sea rises higher. What we have is like Aelfred in Athelney, only the long past to call upon. But in that, there probably lies hope, a way to persuade, to move on, to allow people to understand the world differently. At least it works for me. It works both for me and I use it when I'm talking to my poor fascist friends. So perhaps it'll work for you. This has all been a bit abstract, but I'm afraid living in a van sometimes drives me to abstraction.